Hey everyone, how y'all doing? It's me, Jeremy, one of the many players on the Roll to Forge channel. And aside from playing and running games, I also have a small aspiration to create a game. So, I've never done this before. I've also never live streamed before, so that's personally interesting. And yeah, so if you have any recommendations, I'll be checking the chat every once in a moment while I'm writing here. But I guess I will try to talk out loud and keep it as interesting. I have some like royalty free, as I researched, I think, music. So hopefully this video doesn't get taken down at any point. But here's the first devlog. So I want to make a game that is inspired by Goblin Slayer. So I know there's some negative connotations about some of the things Goblin Slayer did as an anime and as a manga. Manga? I'm not sure. And what I really liked is that the character had a really specialized skill set against a particular set of opponent, and against others he had to kind of play a guessing game and be utilitarian about it. I think of the Beholder episode the most. For any of you that don't know what a Beholder is, Google it. But D&D. And I know that I haven't read the manga, but I've seen the anime, and I know that it's roughly, the gods are role-playing players, and the characters are their fictional suits, if you will. So what I enjoyed about it most is that it's kind of a dungeon delve with characters that are focused in playing. I know that a lot of character creation models can be very wide in scope, although there are others that are simply focused, like the Forge in the Dark system playbooks that are very focused style classes. So I'm taking some inspirations from Darkest Dungeon for this, Goblin Slayer, obviously, Diablo's 3, and the recently announced 4, mostly aesthetically though. Hyperlight Drifters, I want to kind of use, it's super cool in Hyperlight Drifters, they have this 3x3 grid, and it acts as like an abstracted spatial abstraction for combat. So I really wanted to use that because I don't love the 5x5 foot at a time movement and kind of war role style tactician role-playing games, D&D being the greatest example of that. I want it to be a tiny bit more fluid on that sliding scale. So I guess we should write some stuff down. So I wrote some initial questions that I scoured on the internet for people when they first start thinking of games, and there are going to be a ton of questions throughout this that I'll be asking and answering. So yeah, and that's just me talking until there are people in the chat room, and I'll try to talk out loud. So what is the game about? The game is about a group of hunters who are trying to push back the nasties of the world. I guess in my initial thinking that this is a game that kind of appeals to people who play D&D but don't like all of the heavy rule layers that are attached to it, such as multiple actions and all the spells you can cast and everything. I think having a sort of focused set of characters can allow for some sort of like rock, paper, scissors mechanic, but we'll get into that when we get into that question. I'm also not a quick typer. I love to write, but for some reason I just can't find the breakthrough that finds me typing 300 words per minute. I don't even think that's a large amount of words. There are probably people that do like 10,000 words a minute or something. I don't know. Game is about a group of hunters who are trying to push back the nasties of the world. What are the players doing? They are delving into the strongholds, homes, and ecosystems of different monster families, and at higher tiers, mixed ecosystems. So I think that in the beginning of the game, players will be delving into sort of single level or like 1 to 3 level, whatever determines the beginning stage of a game in character growth. I think that they will explore them in single family units, and then as they grow in higher tiers and they start seeing like weird mix of tactics, I have some ideas for what the game master can do, because I feel like the game master in some capacity doesn't get to do level up as much as players do. So I think I have something cool for the GM to do when it comes to picking monster families and using them. So what is the story here? The story is about adversity in the face of danger and finding out what kind of person you are when stress is at its highest. So for this game, I want to take some inspirations from Darkest Dungeon and Torchbearer, simply because one, I think Darkest Dungeon has very heavy inspirations from Torchbearer. Well, I've been thinking about what does the game care about, which I guess we'll just write in there. So I know that a game like this is going to care about time. How long are you in the dungeon? How long are you away from town? This is going to kind of care about, food resources, resting. I really like the camp skills from Darkest Dungeon. I think that's super cool. I think one thing I would love D&D to have is some sort of phasal component where camping has a little bit more structure, a little bit more mechanical weight to it. So I really love the camp mechanics in Darkest Dungeon, how different characters can reduce stress or heal or inspire. They have like small modes of fictional mechanics that kind of bring the character to life. So I think that's something that we would use here. So they care about time, food resources, resting, light resources are definitely something that I think is applicable here. And figuring out what that means when you're because not all ecosystems and environments are going to be dark. Some of them will be on the outside, or some of them will be in trees or something like that. It's not all just down dungeons. I'm thinking that, maybe there's an avian, a bird family of some sort that has like these really cool rock nests or something. Anyways, game cares about time. Game cares about tension. So, and subsequently exhaustion. So I love this. There's a mechanic in 13th Age called the escalation dice, where 13th Age is a passion project for some previous 3.5 D&D developers, and they said we didn't like how long combat was taking, so we created a mechanic that says as the fight prolongs, the more wild and swingy it becomes. So in 13th Age, the escalation die is adds attack bonuses to both sides of both the player side and the GM side of combatants. So attack bonuses and things start to really add up over time. I don't know what my exact numbers are, but I wanted to take that and kind of take it into a stress mechanic of sorts and flip. So like the higher the in the escalation dice, it's a D6, and you set it on the table after the first round of combat, and it ticks up every round from there, increasing the attack bonus of everyone on the field. For this, I want to do something very similar, but instead of giving attack bonuses, it activates fictional cues from monster tactics, so sort of like a soft enrage or a hard enrage from like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14. So used to indicate I don't know what sort of dice system this game will use yet. I don't want that to block any sorts of setting or creativity at this moment. I'll think about that after what I think I want the sort of scope of the system to have. But I do also want it to, I'm thinking like there's something called like the darkest moment. I think about the what is it called, the hero's journey in story structure, and how it follows like this pattern of like the hero finds their quest, they do the thing, they get their tools, they go to combat the evil succeeds in somehow, and they have to test their ability to bounce back from their loss to then have the climactic battle with the big bad while dealing with their minions and heralds and all of that. So I think there's some sort of like darkest hour is what it's called. Like when it reaches, like when, if it were a D6, if it reaches like the 3 or the 6, like the halfway point of the battle, and then like there has to be a climactic finale regardless of what's going on. I think that could be cool. And that climactic finale could be something that allows for swift victory, but comes at a big price for the players. High price for players and with the ability to finish the fight, but at a heavy cost. So this would be something where the GM gets to throw in some sort of plot twist, or I don't know, what have you, really hurt like resources of the players. Let's see, what are the players rewarded for doing? Well, in this game, I think there's reward for obviously slaying, rewarded for slaying monsters. I think since there are going to be classes that are focused on monster families, I think my initial inkling wants to say that a playbook or a class only gets experience from slaying monsters they're not used to. Meaning, if there is a goblin slayer, a goblinoid slayer in this game, I think that they know how to fight goblins. They may get experience from like higher threat goblins, but just any goblins below them is kind of a easy challenge for them, especially as we see in Goblin Slayer in the anime do. He takes out entire hordes of goblins and ecosystems in a matter of a night, just coming well prepared because he knows how to fight them. So I think he gets the most experience from fighting sort of otherworldly creatures like the ogre episode, the beholder, and everything like that. So, but even when it came down to, also mad spoilers for Goblin Slayer, if you haven't seen it, you can like mute me. I'll do this. So like mute. And when I undo these arms, when When I undo these arms, you can come back. So, mute. You've been warned. At the end, he fights that Goblin King, and even though he had to call on the help of multiple heroes, he still was able to predict what the Goblin King was capable of and what its tactics might include. So even though it was kind of the highest threat of enemy, it still didn't really make a difference to I mean, it was dangerous for Goblin Slayer given the story, but he was still able to predict every maneuver that the Goblin King was going to make. So I think that's important to note for creature-specific classes. You can all come back now if you were muted. So I think the players get experience for slaying monsters that are not their focus. So it gives them an opportunity to shine when their monster is present or when their monster is doing things. But I think it's, when you're doing something new, you learn a lot. So there's that. I think they get experience or are rewarded for the delve itself. How deep do they go? That could determine how much experience they get. And that allows the GM to craft sort of a loot or reward system that is based around how big a dungeon is, and given certain restrictions to character levels. Like if characters were level 1, you can only build a dungeon as big as 3 levels or something like that. Again, a la Darkest Dungeon in kind of a way. I suppose they could also, if we include cultures in the game, as far as like character creation is concerned, we could have certain cultural bits in there. So I'll just put it just in case. I don't know if this is a game, I mean, culture should always be important, but I don't know if this is a game that cares about culture when you're in a setting. You know what, it might be concerned about bonds between the players, like trust or mistrust. I think that might be part of it, because you have to be able to trust the person at your back in order to protect you and know what they're doing when you're in a circumstance that you are. So teamwork, I think, is rewardable. Plus, it's something I want to inspire in the games that I make. Teamwork. I think teamwork is very important. The shared experience, the connection. So, what tones and themes create a setting that facilitates this? I wrote it twice. Haha. Definitely the horror genre. Specifically supernatural horror. I think that I want there to be bombs, so that indicates potentially some sort of setting that allows for black powder or gunpowder. So we'll call it black powder tech for now. I also want there to be a sense of alchemy in the world, because I think that if you come prepared for something, you're able to use the pieces of the monster family. So it's sort of a la Monster Hunter. I guess I'll put that down in my touchstones here. So maybe maybe the game cares about crafting as well. Maybe the game cares about, if they're rewarded for bonds, the game cares about teamwork. So what the game cares about essentially tells me what I need mechanics for. The game very obviously cares about combat / conflict resolution. I think that this isn't going to be a sort of roll to hit game. I think this is potentially going to be a more obstacle resolution, like a test resolution game, wherein instead of trying to hit a target number, you're looking for a potential number of successes, and then you have an increasing margin of success that determines how the conflict is going, or the opposite, margin of failure. If unfamiliar, margin of success systems or degree of success systems is when you set a test number, so 1, 2, 3, 4 generally, and this is commonly used with d6s, which are six-sided die if unfamiliar. And when you roll those d6s, you're looking for a particular number or higher. So we'll say in this instance, the number we're looking for is 4, which is, I think, comes from Deadlands, Savage World Deadlands, something like that. But their target number is 4. So if you roll 4 or higher, it means that d6 counts as a success. If you needed 3 successes, but your dice pool allows you to roll 5 dice, and by miracle all of them are successes, it means you succeed with a degree of 2. What that means pertains to abilities or the circumstances, I don't know for this game. I know that it can, for some games, it enhances damage done, it enhances degree of success. So I think that I'm looking at a degree of success system rather than a sort of HP based system. I think there's other ways to play with stamina and health and injuries in a la form of conditions. So if the game cares about tension and exhaustion, it then subsequently cares about conditions. Excuse me. So for tones and things stuff, there's alchemy and crafting. There's black powder tech for bombs and maybe firearms. There's supernatural horrors in this game. That's things like monsters and spirits. Maybe some beasts, but we'll get into monster families in just a moment. So some touchstones for systems. What I'm thinking is that I really like this thing from a game called 5 Torches Deep, where it's very like OSR/D&D. I mean, you can see the slash there, but if unfamiliar, OSR stands for Old School Renaissance. It's a kickback to Advanced Dungeons & Dragons and the mauve box and the white box of D&D, chainmail and those sorts of games. Very like gritty dungeon delve focused games. And then it tries to connect or bridge the gap between OSR and D&D 5e in its latest stages and kind of shrink the simplicity of that game down and make kind of a weaker player character for a heightened sense of grit and realism. What's the term? Not realism, but vermicelitude? I think I pronounced that right. Vermicelitude. So they do this really cool thing with their classes where they have a base class, and then each base class has 3 archetypes or subclasses. But instead of getting, for the base class, you get abilities per level. But for the subclasses, they have sort of this bucket of skills for its archetype or enhancements. And this is where, like, whenever you hit a subclass level in the main class, which I think is 3 and 7, it might be different per class. I don't have it up right now, but when they reach those levels, you get to pick from like 7 or 8 options that kind of differentiates like your warrior subclassed barbarian from every other warrior barbarian out there, because the combinations can be so differing. So the game has 6 classes, and then each one of those has 3 buckets. I think that I'm going to say those things for the game master in terms of tactics. And I am more or less going to go along the lines of like the Forged in the Dark systems, like Blades in the Dark, where each playbook gets a certain list of special abilities they can pick from as they accrue experience. I think that's the route I want to go for classes. I'm going to dive over to YouTube and see if anyone is talking up in here. Nope, still just me, and that's okay. So probably gonna do this for like a little under an hour or so, probably. It's the most I can do. One being my first time, I don't know how much I want to say about something before I go just into like a deep thinking dive and not speaking. So I have no idea if you can hear the music I'm playing, but I think it's important, at least for me, to have some sort of like lo-fi playing while I do this stuff. Helps me focus my thoughts. All right, well, if no one's here, we're going back to Ulysses. Okay. So playbooks designed around specific families of enemies, randomly. So let's talk about the game master. What do I want the game master to be capable of doing, and what tools do I need to supply to the game master as I create this game? Obviously, dungeon creation is a given. I'm talking like tables, I'm talking fiction. We're gonna need the monster families. Which are also going to need the specific denizens, leaders, leveling them up. So in that 5 torches game, I think the bucket of tactics is what I'm going to let the game master use in terms of this. I think this can also potentially, if I'm smart enough, this can be a GM-less game at the end of the day. It might have a table for like random tactics table, and that can be based on the levels of the dungeon. And then, so dungeon creation, tables, fiction, setting stuff. What else? The dungeon master needs town tables. So I think the game, much like Torchbearer, much like Dungeon, much like Darkest Dungeon, much like the Forged in the Dark games, I think this game has a series of phases, and I think those phases are camping. I think those phases, so let's see, let's write that somewhere. Phases. I love phases. I think it's a really cool way to structure a game. And it allows you to kind of take a step back either from the character for a moment and talk at like the player metagame level. It allows you to also focus on characters and dive into I guess the pseudo, or was it ludo narrative properties of a game. I believe that's the correct phrase. So there's delving, there is camping, and there is, I don't want to call it the town phase, humanity? I don't know. I don't want to call it town city phase. I think that's boring. But then is camping boring? I like delving. Prep phase? Meh. Downtime? Maybe downtime. So town, we need tables for town generation. We need NPCs. We need, this is where kind of like when you complete a score in Blades in the Dark, this is kind of like where you get your funds for equipment, I think that playbooks and classes will use loadouts for their specific families similar to Blades in the Dark, and that will affect things like exhaustion, because the game cares about resources and it cares about items, and if it cares about items, then there needs to be some sort of system that allows for items. But I don't want to go the route of D&D in that you can pick each specific item that you carry around with you. I think there's an item loadout, and I definitely think there's something similar. I love the space backpack, and what I mean by that is in Darkest Dungeon there's this there's a grid, and you have to fit items on that grid, and that determines your carrying capacity. So I think that there is potentially a space for that. So if we go back to resources, carrying capacity, a la spatial backpack. And maybe that grid can go up or down depending on a particular playbook's strength. So for instance, there is a playbook that has a very warrior feel to it. Maybe it has one row more of boxes or something. Or it's one grid size bigger. I also imagine, I like the idea of a journal sort of character sheet where you can fold the character sheet in half, like something like this. And on the front would be like your character's details, like their name, what they look like. Maybe there's something about like bonds and stuff on here. On the back of it would be like the backpack, right? So like if you're looking at a person, this is the front of the person, this is the back of the person. Maybe this is sort of like your item loadout type area. And then inside, when you open, you can have like your special abilities, and maybe like if the rules are simple enough, you can have like a copy of the rules in here. Yeah. We should write that down somewhere. Let's make a thing that's called character sheet. What should it have? It should have the playbook type on it. Journal style. Excuse me. Front is details and bonds of the character. Back is equipment / tools. Inside is skills / abilities / rules reference. Who knows, it may not all be able to fit on a single half or side of a paper. Let's talk some of the fun stuff. Let's talk about tropey monsters. So I could use D&D monster families. I could do some research from Magic the Gathering. If this is a Goblin Slayer based game, it's got to be goblinoids for sure. We're actually gonna make this a second heading, and then there can be types down there. There's got to be the undead, because I'm already thinking of like a playbook called The Exorcist, so I can't spell. Is it a C? It's probably a C. Yeah. I'm thinking that if there is black powder, And if there is alchemy and crafting, I think there might be some sort of mechanical-based family. That way there's some sort of like artificer playbook, which could be cool, like someone who specializes in crafting. Because you want to think about abilities that can kind of take the game and break it a little bit. Like once you've established your rules, you can say like, okay, this class can break these sets of rules. Like maybe I don't write a critical in the game, but maybe the warrior-esque family slayers can crit in some fashion. I don't know. I like demons, but I always have this inkling to like, I think I want to do demons in sort of like an insect mode. I think that could be cool. Dragons. Well, let's see. Is this a setting that cares about dragons? How magical is the setting? The undead could be a result of alchemy. The demon insects could be also a result of like mutagenic alchemy. I just think dragons carry a lot of high fantasy knight. And it carries a lot of D&D weight. Do they slay people? Do they take care of people? There are good and bad people in the world. I think maybe there's a human family. Because if we look at Darkest Dungeon, there's the bounty hunter who's good at getting humans, and humans aren't. This isn't necessarily a utopian setting, so. I think beasts. I think animals exist for sure. Maybe there's some like ancient, maybe hybrid beasts, a la Avatar. Just mix a bunch of stuff. I think we'll say wyverns instead of dragons. I think like poisonous wyverns, like poisonous reptiles, giant Komodo dragon things. I think those are possible. If it's not magical, maybe there aren't fae or fairies. What could be some sort of like distorted nature? The beast, technically, the insect demons, but does it affect like flowers? Are there living trees? I don't think they're living trees. Maybe they're living trees. Maybe they're living nature. That might combine with something else. That might be including something else. Has to be an option for water. I think what we look at is biomes, right? I think we talk about what kind of biomes there are. So there's tundra / Arctic. So some sort of like ice. Maybe that's what the undead are in. Maybe they're in some sort, or they create some sort of like tundric environment. I mean, they don't just have to come from a single place. They don't have to wear a single hat. But I think if something were to live there, I'm thinking like Dr. Frankenstein was a thing. I'm thinking 28 Days Later, all that stuff. There's rainforests. Just went to the Pacific Northwest. Absolutely beautiful. We were over in a place called Port Angeles. And, first time I've climbed a mountain. Really, really cool. I guess, I don't know who considers it a mountain, but I climbed 6,000 feet in the air from like a 1,200 elevation. So that was really, really cool. But they had beautiful rainforest there. Mountains / caverns. Let's see. Swamps. Fens. I mean, I could pull up a wiki article, but this is a test of my own experiences. Coasts. jungles. I guess that could fall under rainforests. I'm gonna lump these together. Because I'm thinking that if we have like 8 biomes and there are like 12 families, because I want to do probably about 6 or 7 classes and then let them have, because I think I want there to be some sort of like neutral families or like powerful families of monsters that each of the classes can take a special ability in, but not one that they can focus on. I think those sorts of like stronger families represent part of the teamwork capacity of the game. So for instance, if there were dragons, it'd be something like each one has like dragon blade or drake something, drake shot or something like that, if we're talking like a bow or a gun or something. And it can add to being able to deal with that family, but it would be very like specific outside the realms of what the normal families to deal with are. So then fictionally it says that those rare families aren't often a problem, but for our setting, for our fiction, maybe they are the resulting root of the problem. So let's see, some sort of like eldritch thing, some sort of eldritch horror. Fish denizen people. Maybe these two are the same thing. I'm thinking like all those really deep sea strange creatures. So maybe eldritch horrors and fish aquatic things are the same thing. So what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's call it one more for now. Does Wyvern fall under beast? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna put the word there twice, because maybe. I'm gonna kick over to YouTube again for a hot second, see if anyone's here. Oh no. That's okay, because it's all starting process. Let's go back to Ulysses. No, I think we'll leave I think those are good think abouts for families. So I think like there's the Exorcist. I'm thinking this is some sort of like rogue. I'm thinking like you have to be rather quick, because right, if we think Goblin Slayer, he doesn't really wear like heavy armor. He does wear plate, but he doesn't wear like heavy armor. He tries to keep his sword small because he knows that the goblins fight in caves. So I'm thinking like this is a very like rogue medium fighter or something. Mechanical, this can be some sort of like artificer. I'm thinking that this is some sort of cultist. Something like a warlock. Or a witch. A Wiccan. Because, you know, I want to try and keep it gender neutral. Maybe this is called Cave Fighter? No, that sounds lame. I'm gonna write Cave Fighter, but I don't like it. This is something like a bounty hunter. Law. But what is law, right? We don't know what law looks like in this world. This is some sort of hunter. This is some sort of maybe like a Faustian knight. Maybe I'll scratch that itch for people who like paladin type stuff. What do we call someone who's good at being at sea? Captain? A mariner? A pirate? I don't really like pirate. Something that says I deal with aquatic creatures and eldritch horrors. Maybe a spear? Like a harpoon? Diver? I'll write diver, but I don't love it. Something along that lines. So then what does a character look like? Let's make a big old character heading. So the character has a name, playbook type. It has special abilities. It has a loadout, a loadout specific to it. It has... I hope the red line isn't cheesing anyone at home, but I don't care. Because sometimes when you write, you just gotta vomit it on the page and fix it later. Needs to have some sort of bond section. It needs to have bond/teamwork. Needs to have resources. Skills/moves. Actually, we'll put these up here. Because I don't know if this is a moves-based game or a selected action type thing. I think I'm leaning towards moves. And then those moves are augmented by special abilities. Like when you fight, you have plus whatever amount of die. I think it's a little too early to call it, but I think that's going to be a dice pool degree of success. So I know I said that earlier, but that was still me being very on the fence about it, trying not to make a decision. Characters need, I think there's either action points or an action pool of some sort. Because I want to be able to use that 3x3 grid, and that requires having the ability to move, to use actions to move. So I think, let's talk about resources. Whoops. There's stamina, there's conditions, there's stamina, conditions, because I think that these are your action points. Maybe it's something like you're exhausted or you're injured in a specific way. Your action points maximum is 5, right? To fictionally represent you being in a tired position. Maybe there's a way in conflict to deal with that. Is there could you align with monster families? Game doesn't really reward you for aligning with monsters. I think there are bonds between the players, and I think there bonds between the in-town citizens, and that role play can be some sort of mechanical representation of like lower prices or more recovery or something like that. Maybe. I'm gonna write it because everything's important to write. Let's see, where is... So, social pillar of play outside of party, mechanical weight with fictional causes. Cause and effect, right? Mechanical effects with fictional causes. These could also be a source of tests. I think this is... I think the gameplay here is very like min-maxy. I think this is optimization. Because there could be something to gather information in town about your next target, but you never truly know what's down there until you're down there. So once you encounter something you weren't necessarily prepared for, I think camp allows you to maybe rethink your tactics in some fashion. So maybe it allows you to switch special abilities. So many special abilities are fluid then in this case. That doesn't necessarily make sense though if you've been training one. Maybe. Change of tactics / catching breath. I think there are trap tests, combat tests, exploration tests. You know, you don't necessarily know the complete layout. There's no blueprint you could buy for a goblin's dungeon. Is there magic? Well, I mean, there's the Exorcist, right? So there has to be some magic. I mean, I know that's faith, but... Then we get into stuff like elemental families. Maybe. I think we're going to write it. And we're going to see if we don't love it or not. Because if there's the Eldritch Horror and the demons, then there certainly could be elementals. So in the course of writing this, we have to think fictionally, like, why are there elementals? How did there become Eldritch Horrors? Is it a gate? Is it some otherworldly item that's manifested? I think this is something like Chaos Wizard, but a better name. Cool. How long are we at? And set a timer, like a ninny. Oh, we've almost been at an hour now. I think that's a good stopping point for this one. Well, I'm sorry there wasn't anyone here to check out the live stream of this, but I will put a recorded episode up on the YouTubes for people to see, and yeah, I hope the audio and stuff all meshed with my voice. But for now, my name is Jeremy. This has been my first devlog. I'll probably try to do this in the in the instinct of the tragedy that has befallen the U.S. in terms of people being forced to stay home, me being one of them, trying to find a creative outlet. I think that I want to try to do this at least 1 hour every other day or so and work on it. I may work on it on the in-between between me and the article writing, but yeah, so maybe every other day. I'll make Twitter announcements. There'll be scheduled streams. Other than that, my name's been Jeremy. I hope you've enjoyed hanging out with me today. And for all those watching non-live, you have a beautiful rest of your morning, day, night. Have a good one.